Welcome to the Unveiled by IPS podcast. This episode you're about to listen to is a continuation of the previous episode, so please sit back, relax, and let's get into it.
The next question I would like us to answer is what discipleship is supposed to look like. Are there models? Are there people that were supposed to study what it is they had built? People that have gone ahead of us, of course, in the Bible, because the Bible is the standard. Again, Dr. John, kindly do go first, sir.
It's kind of set up. Okay, so the Bible does give us some examples of what discipleship looks like. I think it's important that the Bible does this because it means that we can have models, things that we can look at, or people we can look at and say, okay, this is how they patterned their discipleship work, so I'll pattern my discipleship work accordingly. And I think I should quickly mention it here before we go further. This discipleship we're talking about, getting involved in discipleship, it's both ways in the sense that it's not just you seeking to go out and look for who to disciple. It's also important that you are accountable to somebody. Okay, because if we look at the examples in the New Testament, especially when you look at the Christians, the first generation Christians, specifically picking on Paul now, a lot of people have that notion that after Paul converted, he just entered the streets and started preaching. But we see that after he had that encounter, he was directed to go to the house of somebody, that's Ananias. Okay, so he had to go to the house of Ananias. Ananias had to teach him, things that he did not know about the gospel. So Paul had somebody who taught him the things that he began to work with. So discipleship is not just about us going and making disciples. It's also important that we ourselves are accountable to someone that will disciple us and bring us up just as they are being brought up in the way of Jesus Christ. And the Bible, so back to models of what discipleship looks like. The Bible gives us some examples. Perhaps the most popular one, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, is Jesus and his 12 disciples. I mean, it was always a question in Sunday school: who was the first disciple of Jesus? Name the disciples of Jesus. And as somebody bearing John, I got my fair share of which one are you, John the Baptist or John the Beloved? So Jesus, the concept of Jesus and his 12 disciples was really, really formed in my head from the beginning. Okay, so that's like the quintessential example of what discipleship looks like. Jesus and his disciples, how he related with them, how he called them, how he related with them, how he addressed their questions. So but there are also other examples. If you look at the Old Testament, you have Moses and Joshua, you have Elijah and Elisha. And I think that the discipleship story of Elijah and Elisha and the almost next in line, Gehazi, I feel like that whole story is really an interesting one and one that everybody should pay attention to when it comes to learning about discipleship. I mean, if you have the time, you can just study the stories of Elijah and Elisha, how Elijah called Elisha, how Elisha served Elijah. So in the Bible, the Bible gives us clues as to who Elisha was. So Elisha was not a small guy. Elisha had a farm, or if the farm was not his, then he probably belonged to probably his father or a close relative. And it was a big farm because we were working with animals. If it was a small farm, he probably have been the one in the sun almost breaking his back, but he was working with animals. And then when he was called, he kills those animals and then offered them as a feast for the people that were around. So that tells you that he's not, if he was not the owner or did not have a say in those animals, he can't just do that. So he was not a small person. But we see where in a place where Elisha was being described down the line, he was described as somebody that poured hands on the water of Elijah. So, regardless of who he was, Elisha was someone that brought himself down, that humbled himself, so to speak, all for the sake of learning what it means to serve God, you know. And in the reverse case, we see the person who was his disciple, how that person was just, that's Gehazi now, was just, something else. Right. So I feel like Elisha, and Gehazi is a really, really wonderful case study of the good, the bad, the ugly discipleship. And then we also have other New Testament examples like Paul and Timothy. And then there's also Aquila, Priscilla, and Apollos. you know. I think that the discipleship story of Aquila, Priscilla, and Apollos is also really interesting too, because Apollos was, after he got born again, he just entered into the street. So who people thought Paul was is who Apollos actually was. He was the one that just heard the gospel. I think he was yes, he was converted after the gospel of the baptism of John. So he just entered the streets and was just preaching what he knew. But it took the intentionality of Aquila and Priscilla to take him in and then teach him, the rudiments of the gospel. And Apollos turned out to be such a powerful minister of God, such that there were people who were even preferring him over Paul, larger than life, as like Paul was in those days. There were people that were like, no, I don't do Paul, I'm with Apollos, that kind of thing. So if Aquila and Priscilla had not had the foresight to bring Apollos in, Apollos could have constituted a nuisance to the early church, could have been one of the heretic teachers. But because Aquila and Priscilla had that foresight, they were able to bring him in. And then we also see in the example of Paul and Timothy how he illustrated discipleship as the process of raising faithful men who would go on to disciple others. So that's admonition of Paul to Timothy about raising faithful men is essentially the definition of what successful discipleship looks like. So successful discipleship is not just raising one disciple, is making sure that you have raised somebody that can go on to raise other faithful people, setting up a chain reaction of faithfulness really being passed down the generations and the preservation of the gospel. So those are like some of the examples that we look at, that we can see in the New Testament.
I mean, the relationship between Paul and Timothy is one that, because he was in the things, you could tell how much Paul's heart was with Timothy, regardless of the distance. He did his best to ensure that he explained to him, he clarified a lot of things. And I mean, it was just so really, I'm already using a lot of adjectives, but I mean, it was really nice to, it was really nice to see, right? Reading up the book of First and Second Timothy, really amazing. And it's the way Paul would always encourage, right, Timothy. He would always encourage the church, right? Imitate me just as I imitate Christ. Be followers of me just as I am of Christ. So it's a statement of an attainment, right? You cannot just come and say that come and imitate me because I'm also imitating Christ. If your life is not outrightly spelling out these things as laid down by the scriptures, then you have no business telling anybody to follow you. You have no business trying to gather people, right? Because sometimes it can be misconstrued when you see a group of people and then the person that is supposed to be in charge of that group, right? The person has a lot of character flaws. The person is not in line with exactly what the standards of the scripture has laid down for us as Christians. Then why are you misleading other people? Right. So discipleship is just like Dr. John has said, it's a two-way thing. It's not just you trying to follow Jesus. You must have followed Jesus and learned from him and someone, right? So it's
Yeah.
like a chain reaction. I'm not a science student. Dr. John is, of course. That's why he's a doctor. But he's a medical doctor, in case you are wondering, right? It's like
Right.
a chain reaction. You're picking up from somebody, you're getting discipled. You should also do the same with others. So if there are young people around you, right? Young people that they have genuine interest, they have genuine yearning, right, for the things of God. You should not allow them to just be, right? You should also do your best to contribute as little as or as much as you can, right? Hold their hands through. People are going through a lot these days,
Yes,
right?
so
And it takes just something very tiny to to take some people, right, off. So let's be our brother's keeper. Right, in that sense.
I wanted to add that um, in discipling people and attempting to teach people, it's very important that we do what we learn, even as we're telling other people what they should do, you know. So Jesus first began to preach and to teach before he asked his disciples to do the same. Then Paul was saying in Philippians chapter 4, verse 9, that those things which you have both learned and received and heard and seen in me do, and the God of peace shall be with you. So effective discipling is doing and teaching, not just teaching alone, and not teaching and then doing, is doing and teaching. And that's how you can bring up people who follow you and to follow Christ. I just wanted to add that.
Very, very profound. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank
Thank
you,
you as
thank
well.
you. Well, this has been an interesting conversation, and trust me when I say that I am learning. I'm sure Dr. John is also learning, right?
No,
We're
I'm
not
learning.
speaking to you. We're not having this conversation as people that have already attained that height
That I
or just come
miss.
and that have made it in life. God is still helping all of us. I mean,
Yes, sir.
so the next phase of this conversation, right, we're just going to be picking on two things, right, that helps you say that, okay, this person is an actual disciple of Christ. These are like fruits that you can see in the life of this particular person. So I'm going to be taking one, and Dr. John will be sharing the second one. So the first one is that a disciple is a follower and imitator of Christ. We've explained and we've emphasized on the word follow, right from the beginning of this episode. Follower, a follower and an imitator. We've also actually spoken about imitating, right? When we're talking about Paul and Timothy, right? Well, Paul was always making reference to imitate me as I imitate Christ, like that, right? So it's like mirroring, it's like reflecting, right? A disciple is somebody that mirrors, that reflects an image. Who is the image? Christ, right? And is also somebody that obeys his commands. Obedience
Hmm.
is at the heart of following
No,
Jesus.
disciple.
Obedience, obedience, obedience. Just the way Peter, right? When Jesus was walking on water and Peter wanted to, Jesus gave him a command. And Peter tried. If he did not obey, he might not have even taken any step. He might not have experienced what it was like to walk on water, or to also have his legs stable on water. So it takes a lot of obeying. And obedience also has a lot of sprinkles of love in it, right? Because if you
Yes.
don't love Jesus, if you don't yearn after him, if you don't want to please him, you're not going to obey him, right? So obedience is very, very critical. Very, very critical. Just like it says, very
It's
key,
key.
biggest key, right? Just like it says in John 8:31, and says, if ye continue in my word, then ye are my disciples indeed. And obedience has to be consistent, right? In this case, it's not touch and go. It's not one time. It's not something you do once. I should have obeyed you yesterday now. And today, I just feel like, let me just experiment. Let me do this today by myself, right? Let me just take the right turn. Okay, you tell me to take left. Oh no, let me take right today. I just want to see what's on the right. There are actually consequences to disobedience, right? So, in your walk
Capacity.
with Jesus, your walk with God every day, let's always pray and ask God to help us to obey Him, right? It's a state of the heart. That's what I think. A man that obeys God, his heart
Yes.
has been aligned or positioned to do that, right? So it takes a lot of consistency. You do it today, do it tomorrow, do it
Yes.
today, do it tomorrow, next week, next year, next that, until it becomes a nature, until it becomes a core quality that you carry. That even when you want to disobey self, even you know that no, this is not going to help me. It's not going to work. Right. It's just going to become very distasteful to you. That is the goal at the end of the day. So let me allow our
Yeah.
doctor, medical Dr. John, to take the second.
All right. So thank you very much. I have been very, very much exalted by the profound points you just made. And I think I'll just want to add that in addition to what you said in what it means or what it looks like to be a disciple of Christ, in addition to following and imitating Christ, obeying his commands, there is another key way to show that you really are a disciple of Christ. And Jesus said it in John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35, where he said the world would identify his disciples with the love that they have for one another, as they love each other just as Christ loved them. So, as a disciple, the love of Christ will be evidence in your life. Like the obedience that you show to God, your devotion and your commitment to Him, it will show in how you go about your daily life. So, your love life, how you relate with other people, how you love other people, how you respond to the provocations from other people. I don't know if you're familiar with that verse in Hebrews where it says, follow peace with all. So how I looked at that verse changed one day when I was listening to a preacher and he was saying that what that verse means is that people will not see God if you don't follow peace, that they won't see what God looks like in action if you don't follow peace with all men and are holy. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. So like people would only be able to see what the love of God looks like if you show it to them. Right? And only a true disciple of Christ can show the world just what Christ is. Only a true disciple of Christ can show how the love of Christ is. Only a true disciple of Christ can show how Christ would have loved. Okay, so if people cannot look at us and say this person is living as Christ would have lived, or oh, when I look at this person, I see Christ. That's how the believers in Antioch came about the name Christian. It's because the people around them saw that these people are living how this Christ they preached. I think it was in the last podcast we're talking about how if someone goes for evangelism and I mean somebody went for evangelism, then their neighbor was saying, "Oh, if it's that person's church, I'm not going." That it was the last episode, I think. So obviously, the person in that compound that the neighbor doesn't want to go to their church, obviously that person has not been living like a true disciple, right? Because the person in question has not seen the love of Christ in the life of that person. So if you really are following Christ, then his love, would also be evident. And these things are intermixed actually. It's not like you have to obey his commands and then now find a way to love other people. If you are obeying his commands, it will bleed into every aspect of your life and that love will just be there. By virtue of following Christ closely, that love will be there. So it's a key indicator of what it looks like to be a disciple of Christ. Other people can see you and say, oh, this person is living like the Christ that he preaches. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for listening up until this point. This discussion will be continued in the next episode, so head into the next one for more. And if it isn't up yet, not to worry. Stay tuned and we'll be back soon. Till next time, God bless.